Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast, where I am your host, Kirsten YURICH, speaker, author, retired CEO, mother of four, and recovering workaholic. Explore with Central Pennsylvania local executives what it takes to lead well, live well, and learn well. Understanding that leaders cannot survive, let alone thrive, without a spirit of curiosity, a discipline of accountability, and a disposition for vulnerability. Let's dive in. Welcome today to another Executive Hustle podcast. Our guest is Alison Pidgeon, CEO and founder of Move Forward Counseling, a mental health therapy practice for children, adolescents, adults, families, spanning our entire state with 6 to 7 physical locations and offering online services. Such a great topic for listeners today because mental health in the workplace and really just in society overall has bubbled to the surface since 2020. And I'm so curious about your take on that, the impact to business, and how leaders can do better in this area. But I don't want to get ahead of myself because this also isn't your only business. So lots to explore today. Before we get started, welcome, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me, Kirsten.
Oh, so excited to dive in. I often open these conversations, just by asking, how did we get here today for you? Did the 7 to 10-year-old Alison think you'd be a therapist, a business owner? What?
No, not at all. And actually, I, went through college, didn't really know what I wanted to do, and had some great experiences along the way that propelled me to become a therapist and really sort of was going up that ladder, and started getting promoted in the agency where I worked. And I thought I was going to become a hospital administrator.
Oh, that's a very different path.
Yes.
So how did you branch out on your own?
So I always tell people this is where a really beautiful story comes out of a bad situation. I had been promoted to be the director of an outpatient clinic in this nonprofit mental health agency where I was working, and I had two little kids at home, so there wasn't a lot of sleep happening, and I just got super burned out. And I showed up at work one day after I was up with my son all night because he was sick, and just thought, like, what am I doing here? I was just so stressed out. Just felt like I was putting out fires at home, putting out fires at work, and that didn't feel good. And I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And someone said to me, well, why don't you just go start your own practice? And I was like, oh, yeah, why don't I do that? That sounds like
Uh-huh.
a great idea. So I gave them 6 weeks notice. And in that time, I started a private practice just with myself. And that was back in 2015, about 9 years ago now.
Wow. And now you're across the entire state, multiple locations, and serving about how many clients you think?
I think at any one time, we probably have about between 2,500 and 3,000 clients,
Mm.
and we have a total of 80 employees.
Wow. That's amazing for 9 years.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is not your only business. So obviously the start your own business bug bit you pretty hard.
It did. Yeah, I got really curious about other businesses. And so along the way, I started doing business consulting. I started a virtual assistant company for mental health practices, which I had for about 3.5 years, and I sold that. I started investing in real estate, got really interested in that as a business and another stream of income. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think what else. There's just, yeah, well, now I'm doing a wellness center. So we
Mhm.
started what we're calling the Inspire Wellness Collective in downtown Lancaster. So we're creating like a co-working space and community for wellness providers in that building.
Wow. That's still, sort of in your niche here with mental health and helping people live a better life, which is, part of my mission here with, live better and lead better. Tell me, wellness, mental health, where are we today? Where have we come over the last couple of years? How has it changed? What are leaders facing in this area?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been working in mental health for 20 years to see how
Mm.
it's changed really
Yeah.
pretty dramatically since the pandemic. So obviously the fact that we could use telehealth, and that is here to stay. So that's very different than it was pre-pandemic. The other thing I've noticed is that there's just a lot more understanding of mental health and less stigma around it. I think
Mhm.
everybody just kind of was like, yeah, we went through a pandemic, like we're all struggling. and that became much more normal to talk about. And I think too, when you sort of talk to people from different generations, the younger they are, the more it's just like mental health is so accepted. Like teenagers today will be like, of course I go to therapy. I go to the gym, I go to the doctor, I go to therapy. Like it's
Right.
just a normal part of how I take care of myself. Whereas like the baby boomers are like, hush, hush, we don't talk about, we go to therapy. Um,
Yes.
and then you get everything in between too.
Yeah. So it's more talked about, it's more accepted. Does that translate to more people doing it?
I think so. That's what we've seen. There's been a big flood in demand since the pandemic. And I think too, like people were probably kind of struggling before that happened. And then obviously that put a whole nother big, heap of stress on top of people. And so
Mhm.
that really propelled people to seek therapy.
Yeah. And how does that show up for leaders, when they're trying to support employees that may be going through mental health challenges or the stress of work? It's challenging in many industries. So just work can be a mental health trigger or source of stress. What are strategies for leaders as they try to navigate being a supportive workplace, for instance?
Yeah, that's where I think like having some level of understanding of mental health issues and how that affects people is really important. And also, as a leader and a business owner, you kind of have to balance like, yes, I understand you may be struggling with these issues, but at the same time, like, I need you to come to work and do your job. And
Hmm.
how do you, that's a very delicate dance, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think, asking for help, asking for, um, you know, consultation from peers about, hey, have you ever dealt with this issue at work? Or, um, you know, these employee issues come up all the time. So I'm sure other people have dealt with them and probably have good ideas of how to handle them.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I ran into was, leaders making it safe to talk about it, and that may mean that they have to share some of their challenges or some of the struggles that they are under, or just show that they're not, this might be just me talking about my personal experience, but not showing that you're a robot, right? Like you
Right.
can have an up and a down. You can have a good day and a bad day. You have needs, and you have to take care of yourself. And you're not always on all of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think modeling for them, like, hey, I'm a real person too, and I have my
Mhm.
bad days and my struggles and is huge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and as a leader and as a female leader, right, I struggled with a lot of these sort of multiple roles that you have, multiple demands. You have demands at work, you have demands at home. This has to be, very familiar for you as well. You seem to have a lot of success. What are some of the strategies that you would share are working for you right now?
Something that really was a huge game changer for me back in 2021 was that I hired a nanny slash housekeeper,
Hmm.
and it's a full-time job. So I have three kids. They're 12 and under,
Mm,
and
so
there's
busy.
a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of laundry, and dinner needs to be made. And I was just spending so much time doing those things, not only the time, but also just the like space that it takes up in your brain,
Hmm.
right? Like, oh, I got to keep track of his soccer stuff. And what about this thing on,
Yeah.
the weekend and all of that kind of stuff. And just to be able to pass that off to somebody and not have to even think about it anymore is just such a liberating feeling knowing like she's got it, that she can take care of it. I don't have to remind her. She knows it's a task she does and she's on top of it. And so that has really been huge for me so that I can spend my time on my business, but then also I can spend my time hanging out with my kids,
Right.
quality time, not like yelling at them to pick up their shoes and why did you make this big mess? And you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I felt like I was spending the whole time cleaning up after them and wasn't really spending time with them.
With them. Yeah.
Yep.
How did you get to that point? Because, I can see that being a real struggle for somebody thinking that, those are the traditional roles of parenting, male or female, right? We take care of the things in their house. This is what we do, and it's so ingrained. What helped you get there to sort of release that narrative to be free from sort of that restriction and be like, this is not. what I want to show my kids as parenting.
Yeah, I think we get that those like household duties like conflated with like being a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think there's a lot of examples in our society of like, I made my kid's birthday cake. That means I'm a good mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't have time to make my kid's birthday cake, but I'm still going to have a cake because I bought it from the bakery and we're still going to have a party and we're still going to invite all their friends. You know what I mean? Like, we're still going to
Right.
do all that stuff, but I'm not going to spend like 10 hours slaving away putting together a party. And that doesn't make me any less of a good mom. So I think that's where, like, just because you're not the one making dinner every night and doing the laundry and all that stuff doesn't mean you're not a good parent. And I think
Yeah.
we have to like separate those things.
Yeah. Finding your worth in different places, right? Not where someone else is telling you to put it.
Right. And
Yeah.
like my kids aren't probably going to remember I made their birthday cake, but they are going to remember I took them on vacation or
Mm-hmm.
we did this special thing together on the weekend or, those kinds of things.
Right. They're remembering the quality time together. Yeah.
Right.
That's such a powerful message, I think. That's very liberating and powerful, I think, for parents out there trying to quote unquote do it all and have it all. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh gosh. You're leading an agency. It's quite large. It's across the whole state. What do you know now about leadership that you wish you knew back in 2016 when you started?
Oh, so many things. I think in the beginning, I felt the pressure of kind of like keeping everybody happy and, kind of like we had these policies or these guidelines, but then I was like bending them to make individual people happy. And then I saw how that like backfired on me. And then I learned that I really needed to do what was best for the business as a whole, like the majority and the business, and not necessarily like for one individual person, because
Mhm.
that person could be there for a long time. They could quit tomorrow. I don't know, but I need to do what's, best for like the health and sustainability of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty powerful lesson. Uh, how's that showing up now? And are you able to sort of coach others around that? Because that's probably repeating itself with your newer managers. Everyone sort of experiences that type of, I need them to like me, so I need to, uh, you know, do things that make them happy as a new manager. So that's a repeated lesson that gets learned in every agency, like at every level, over and over, in my experience, over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that this is probably similar in a lot of industries, but especially therapists, I feel like want
Mhm.
everybody to feel like warm and fuzzy and
Oh, so
we have a
sorry.
good
Yeah.
rapport and they don't want to be the bad guy, right? So
Mm,
that has been quite the learning curve, I think, for our newer managers. But I think it really is helpful to give them, not that you want to go into too much detail, but like give them an understanding of like why this policy exists or why we've made this decision.
mhm.
Because I think that really helps them then to understand like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then that helps them to uphold the decision or the policy.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Making sure people understand the why so that they're not trying to make people happy with the person in front of them, because then they end up being seen, in my experience, as being really inconsistent because the next person that comes in front of them wants something different, and if they
Yep.
give in to that person and then give in to the next person, then
Yep.
they become a manager who's inconsistent.
Yep. And then you're doing something slightly different for everybody, and then it gets really
Mhm.
confusing.
Yeah, you can't run an organization like that.
No.
Yeah. So I love what you said around, therapists and just the natural friction between, how you're trained as a therapist. And I have a clinical background also, not necessarily in direct therapy, but you are trained around this therapeutic relationship and, very strong ethics and things like that. And there is sort of this natural friction with, management and, running a business and sort of those policy procedure, almost black and white type of things. And it's interesting to hear you talk about, having to work new people through that, and that's sort of a pain point for you right now.
Yeah, I would say so. I think though the staff that we have is really open to
Mhm.
getting coaching and leadership, and they're really hungry for that, and they're
Yeah.
open to learning and making those changes. So that's really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. Well, culture has a lot to do with that. I'm guessing that you, having stepped away from a large agency to open your own practice, you've been very deliberate about the culture that you've created there to attract specific individuals. Tell me a little bit about the culture at Move Forward.
Yeah, so I mean, typically in mental health, and this is not just where I used to work, but pretty much across the board, there's definitely this feeling of like, you are a therapist, you need to work for very little money,
Mm,
like this martyrdom kind of complex where it's like,
right.
oh, too bad if you're tired, we need you to see more clients because there's more people walking in the door. And like, I never wanted any of that for my staff. So
Mm,
we have some very different philosophies from that kind of environment. So we really encourage the therapist to have a specialty as opposed to in community mental health, it's like you have to help whoever walks through the door. Well, if I
yes.
have no experience helping that person, then I'm not going to do a
Challenge.
good job, right?
Hmm.
So we really encourage them to tell us like who do you work well with, who do you not work well with. It's perfectly okay to say, you know what, I don't have experience with this type of issue. I don't want to see this client. We're also really big on work-life balance. So our expectation of the number of clients they see is pretty reasonable considering the industry. Um, I also, in my previous role, there was some lip service given to, yeah, family comes first. If you need, take care of your family and
Hmm.
call out sick, like that's what you need to do. But then when push came to shove and you actually did it, it was like you got the feeling like it really wasn't okay because you were calling it for the
Oh,
third time that month because your toddler was sick again. Um, and I never wanted my staff to feel that way. I really do feel like, your family and personal responsibilities come first, and we work really hard at work, and you need to take care of your family, and when you come back, you'll take care of what you need to take care of. So, um, it's just interesting with the culture that we built and then people who come from other other places of employment, and it's amazing to me how um I don't know if I want to say like patriarchal the environment was that they came from, but just like there were these like rules that just don't even make sense to me anymore.
hmm.
Like we usually keep our cameras on when we're meeting on Zoom. And the one therapist was like, I'm going to be at the meeting, but I need to keep my camera off because I'm going to be nursing my baby. She's like, is that okay? And I was like, of course it's okay. Like, please feed your baby. Like, I totally understand. But
So we
it's
don't
like,
have to watch that.
yeah,
No,
like
apparently.
I just don't understand why she didn't think it was
Oh,
going to be okay. Like, of course it's okay. You know what I
right.
mean? But like obviously she came from a place where it wouldn't have been okay for
Yeah.
her to nurse her baby and keep her camera off. So
Like the
there's
rules were more important than the person.
right, exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So I don't, I mean, I can be pretty laid back about a lot of things. Again, I think that we all work hard. We do a great job. Like there's just certain things that just don't seem, if it doesn't affect your job, then I'm not worried about it. Like people ask me like, is it okay that I have a tattoo that people can see? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I'm like, are you a good therapist? Perfect. I don't care if you have tattoos all over your body. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
It reminds me of really those bigger agencies that you run into, and having worked in some, they get so large and unwieldy that you end up with all of these rules, and they stray so far, and the layers are so many that oftentimes you can't draw a line from the rule or the policy back to the intent or the purpose,
right,
or the value that maybe one day in the past it really did connect, but there's so few circles or connections of feedback anymore that they don't know anymore. And there's these trails of policies and things that don't make sense. And
right.
you at your size, have the luxury of continuing to say like, wait, does this make sense? Should this be like this? Do we need an actual rule or policy for this
Right.
or not?
Right. Yeah, even like with dress code, like we have a very relaxed dress code.
Hmm.
Because I think that's the way our workplace is moving in general, but I also am like, why do we have to get dressed up as therapists? You know what I mean? Like, who said that was a thing?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're testing the boundaries. Is that a more professional thing for you, or is that part of your personality as well?
I think for me, especially, I'm very passionate about like changing the mental health landscape, not only for clients, but also for staff. And I think
Mm.
that's big, that's a big piece of it is like we don't have to do everything as usual. We can create something different where, staff is well taken care of, clients get great care.
Right.
Um, staff doesn't need to get burned out, all that kind of stuff, which is very typical. So I just really want to show that like you can treat your staff really well. They
Hmm.
can take great care of the clients. You can run a profitable business. Like they don't all have to be mutually exclusive.
Right. Well, it goes back to the previous conversation around, your personal narratives and, how you're running your house, right? You both in person and in business, you're not allowing these false narratives, prescribed by somebody else to dictate how you want to run your house, how you want to raise your kids, and how you want to run your business. There are
Right.
more than one way to deliver value as a parent, as a clinician, as a leader.
Right.
It's a really interesting parallel here.
That's a very good summation. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, yeah. It's because I'm taking notes. I can this stuff. That's the advantage here. Uh, so tell me, I've been certainly in the helping profession and in the field slightly differently, but from your perspective, what's most challenging and what's most rewarding about working in the mental health in the therapy practice the way that you do?
I would say the most challenging thing is finding staff. There's generally a shortage. There therapists have to be highly trained, have to be
Hmm.
licensed, further makes the pool even smaller.
Yeah.
Um, and then I would say the most gratifying thing is hearing from the staff how happy they are where they work. That's number one for me. We've won several Best Place to Work awards, and that is probably the number one thing that I'm the most proud of. They get surveyed anonymously. Um, and yeah, it's just that's my thing. Like I want to make the work environment as good as possible for the staff. And then I do hear lots of great things when I'm out in the community, but also from the staff about clients getting better, clients who have had an experience in therapy that's really been life-changing for them. I can't tell you how many times I've been somewhere where they find out where I work and they tell me they're a client.
Aw.
And they tell me, what a great experience it was and how helpful it was to come to therapy at Move Forward. So
Mm,
that's super, super gratifying to me.
that's amazing. Making all the hard work worth it.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're not alone in finding the staff. I think every industry that I speak with, finding staff is one up there in the top three main challenges. So unfortunately, that is not unique to your industry.
Right.
One of the things that was really hard for me as a young leader was taking care of myself. I had a real hard time prioritizing myself. I was always prioritizing the team, the goals, what we needed to achieve. And so I'm curious, part of my mission now and in all of the work that I do in coaching and consulting and even in the podcast and sharing these stories is around helping other people avoid some of the same mistakes, right? If we can know better, we do better. So if you were to speak to a leader like that early in their career, rising the ladder and not taking care of themselves, what would you tell them? How would you, either what do they need to be doing? Or if they know what they need to be doing, how do you convince them to just do it?
That is a great question. So that took me a long time to learn. I will admit that I probably didn't really do that until the last couple of years. And it was literally kind of born out of me running myself into the ground.
Wow.
So, I was starting to have like physical health problems. I was exhausted all the time. I was like in my late 30s. I was like, I'm way too young to be feeling this way.
Right.
Um, and then I started to do things like take 20 minutes and sit down outside and stare out the trees in my backyard, and like in the past I would have thought, well, this is a waste of time. I could be
Sure.
working right now. And then I realized that, when I let my mind wander, have those sort of like blank spaces, that's when I like work through problems or,
Mhm.
have some of my best ideas. And I started to see how that made me more productive when I actually was working, because when I was feeling burned out or when I was just working all the time, it felt like I was spending big chunks of time just like staring at the computer, not really getting anything done.
Yeah.
Um, and so once I started taking those, even if it was 5 or 10 minutes here and there, it was like, okay, I'm just going to get up and take a walk because I'm just staring at the computer and not getting anything done. And just realizing how much that helped me to be productive then when I was working. And then I was like, well, this time is valuable. I'm not just sitting here doing nothing. Um, but I was very stubborn for a long time and didn't do that.
So very similar. And this is, the same advice that you see in many places, right? Jack Welch called it window time, creative, free time, downtime. You're standing at the window, you're staring outside. For you, it was looking at the trees. How do we get these leaders to avoid burnout earlier in their career? Because I really think we have a leadership epidemic of people burning out, people not wanting to be leaders. I was reading somewhere like 25% of managers don't want to be managers anymore. That's a problem. And then, many employees leave their companies because their managers aren't doing a great job.
Hmm.
So, and it's fixable. And it's just, and we have mental health crisis. So it's like there's just all of these signs out there that, we sort of know what we need to do, but we're not doing it. How do we help people out there?
Right.
Yeah. So we need the solution. We need to put it out there in the next 5 minutes. Got it?
Okay, I got it. I will come up with something brilliant in 5 minutes.
Solution one, call Move Forward Counseling and get started on your next session because it's amazing.
That's right.
Or call for a job because it's a good place to work. Yes. It is just frustrating when you run into somebody who is in the hamster wheel, right? One, you and I are
Yes.
both there, and then you can see it on you can see it on their face, and you just want to walk them outside, sit them down, and say, this is how you get out of it. But it's counterintuitive when you're in it.
Yes, yes, for sure. I was actually just talking to a friend about that. And I think too, the other problem is like, even if you think, okay, well, I'm gonna go, sit down and relax, whatever, I'm putting that in air
Air
quotes.
quotes. She did air quotes, guys.
Yeah. Your brain is still going a million miles an
Yeah.
hour. And then you maybe start, busyness for people a lot of times is, you're avoiding something, you're avoiding thinking about something, maybe you're avoiding dealing with a relationship. And so when you actually do sit down and get quiet, those things pop up and those, we don't want to deal with those
You're
uncomfortable
uncomfortable.
feelings.
Yeah.
Right. So we just want to keep going, 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 going until we're exhausted and we hopefully fall asleep. But I think part of it too is like dealing with some of that stuff and learning mindfulness and learning like, okay, these thoughts are going to pop up, but it doesn't mean I have to judge them, or it doesn't mean I need, they're going to drag me down into a depression or whatever. It's just like, learning those mindfulness skills because that's part of what's going to come up when you slow down.
Yeah. Just because it comes up doesn't mean I have to deal with it right now.
Right.
I can let it go and keep looking at these trees.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a powerful skill but it is something to be cultivated, right? Uh,
Definitely. Yeah. Cause I think for a long time I was running from not wanting to think about things that were difficult in my life.
mhm.
And that's why I was like working all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds super similar, quite frankly.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that resonate with that thought. Um, yeah. Wow. This was really great. Super, super helpful, reminding me of so many journeys that I've been on. And I think there's just been so much that's been shared. Uh, gosh, I'm going to summarize a couple things because there's just been so much. I'll start with what we just ended with, which was, leaders, if you're in burnout, more work is not the answer. Stepping away and finding some quiet time to think, to be creative, to just let your mind wander. And as Allison said, even if some things come up that aren't awesome, right? It doesn't mean you have to deal with them right that moment. Write them down, get them out, but don't use that as an excuse to not get some quiet time. It is where your best ideas are going to come from. We talked about a big shift in mental health. It is much more of an okay topic to talk about. The stigma is gone. We're talking about it. Young people are going to the therapist like they're going to the gym. And us older people can really take that as a lesson, and we need to do that. Um, Leaders can make it safe for people to talk about that in their own companies by modeling good behavior, talking about their own mental health, showing that, what, I need a day off today, right? Those are the ways that you can make it safe. And I just love that we had this thread around a couple different of your stories today, which was around letting go of false narratives about some role that you may be playing in your life, whether it's a personal role or professional role, that locks you into one way of thinking, this is how I have to deliver value, whether that's to my kids or to my staff or to my spouse, that baking that homemade cake or whatever, that's the way I have to deliver value. Well, maybe it's not. And what other narrative may serve you better? So just amazing, amazing stuff today, Allison. I am so glad we did this. If people want to know more about you, more about Move Forward, how can they find you?
Yeah, you can check out our website. It's www.moveforwardpa.com, and you can see all of our different offices and all of our staff across Pennsylvania. Probably the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. You can just look me up by my name, Alison Pidgeon. I do post quite a bit on there, different things I'm up to with my various businesses. So,
And more to come in the future, I'm sure. I don't think
yes.
you're finished. Outstanding. We will have all of those links in the show notes so people can see them there. Allison, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for another great Hustle Conversation with the Central PA Executive. You can find out more about my guest in the show notes. And if you liked the episode or have something to add to our conversation, please find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribe, rate, and review. Remember, leadership is best practiced in community. You know a leader who needs to hear something from this episode, so pay it forward and send it to them today. Don't wait. Until next time, the best leaders not only lead well, they live well and learn well. Bye now.